Okay, so hello and welcome back to another Unity tutorial. In this one I'm going to be going into showing you how and why you should use the profiler, and if you don't know what that is then obviously stick around and I'll explain it. But basically, obviously it's great and all when you're developing your game, you know, you're making stuff happen, you're adding new things, and you keep adding new things and it works and it's great. Then eventually, depending on your machine, or you know, if you're using it on someone else's machine, let's say you're making and testing a game, it runs fine, then you say, hey friend with bad computer, can you test this? And then obviously it runs like just really slow. So this is going to be a quick introduction to how to improve frame rate or just performance in general by doing some simple things, because there's always going to be complex ways to get the best possible performance, but this is a way to improve really bad performance when there's certain obvious things people might do without realizing how bad it is. Because I've seen people's YouTube tutorials. Now, I'm not saying my YouTube tutorials are perfect and I do every video, everything efficiently. And if I ever do something really not inefficiently, like in the inventory system, there was one bit. I'm going to continue with the inventory system tutorials, but there was one thing I did quite inefficiently, which in the next video I'll go back and change. But it, didn't affect performance. But the point is, as your game gets bigger and bigger, it will affect performance. And you might as well just get into best practices early and sort out these problems right now. So. I've been doing this in my game, right? If you're coding for 5 or 6 hours or something, and then you're making loads of progress, you probably don't realize half the time, or you don't really care that the performance is dropping, because you might not notice it if you're on a good computer or something. But this is actually, it's not one of those clickbait videos, how to increase your frame rate by 60 FPS. It's nothing like that. It's actually just fixing bad code that's inefficient. So currently I just have a sphere and a script with no code. So that's fine, it's not going to be doing anything really. Now, first of all, the profiler, if you don't have it on your Windows, you can either get it from up here, or it's Control-Shift-7, I think. Let me see. It's on Analysis, Control-7, sorry. And you get this window, so obviously dock it somewhere. We don't really need the game view for this, so I can replace that. So this is it. Now let's just press play, because you don't really see anything going on until you play. So, as you see, that's a mess. So, first of all, what you'll notice is there's obviously a graph, and it has this FPS and MS thing. So MS is as in milliseconds for the frame, and FPS is how many frames get rendered. Now, basically, normally graphs with performance, you would expect better performance, higher on the graph, but in this case, it's actually the higher it is, the more stuff it's doing. So lower is better performance. Now, what this basically means is if we're below this line here, we're getting better than 100 FPS, and if we're below this line, we're getting better than 200 FPS. So your goal is obviously to make it as good as possible. Now, as you notice, even when I'm in the actual game as well, it goes up a bit more because it has to put more resources into doing stuff here. Obviously, if you're tabbed out, sometimes games go into a hibernation mode almost, where they do less stuff because they're running in the background, but they still happen sometimes. Or games that are nice, pause if you tab out or something. But what you can actually do is you can click on here and... Oh, we have to be in game view, don't we? Let's put game up here then. So if you go into the game view and stats, you actually see your FPS. So 80 FPS. Now, first of all, you'll be thinking, 80 FPS in a scene with nothing going on, just a sphere. That's pretty bad. You would expect to be getting more than 80 FPS. And I have a GTX 970, so, I shouldn't be getting that bad. And I've got a pretty good processor. So I would not expect that. And now, obviously, the big thing here is, what is this yellow? We've got a lot of yellow being used up. And you can imagine if we got rid of this yellow, the performance would go really good, because this yellow is using up everywhere. So as you see, everything's color-coded here. So green is how much it's using on rendering and in scripts and physics and everything. Now, as you see, the performance is getting to the point where it's getting even worse. It's comparing it to 30 FPS. But we want to get rid of all this yellow, or as much of it as possible, because we're spending too much time doing the yellow. So what is yellow? It's VSync. Now, if you don't know what VSync is, you'll have seen it in game settings when you're first opening a game and you're tweaking your graphic settings. VSync is for special monitors, and it also does something in your frame rate. I'm not an expert. I don't know every little bit it does, but honestly, turn it off unless you have a special monitor, because it's just pointless. So I always turn it off, and it just increases your frame rate by loads. So as you see, VSync, we're getting how much FPS up here? 80, okay? Pause. Edit. Wait, which one was it? This is a different Unity version. They've actually changed it. Yeah, on my version it's different. Now I'm going to have to actually try and find it. Because usually you can go on to... Where's graphics and quality? Preferences? I've already clicked on that one. Settings. Here we go. They've put it onto a window now. I've not actually used the beta version enough. But if you go onto quality and you look on the oh, it's all here. That's weird. Okay, so I've got a window for it now. Let's just dock it. Oh, that's weird. I don't like that. But anyway, you'll see down here we have VSync. Let me just close Steam. That's probably a good idea. Okay, VSync count, whatever. Now, if you actually look on here for VSync, let's just let's turn a deep profile on. And where is the oh, we have to press play for it. Okay. But anyway, yeah. So VSync says this. Just put don't sync. All right, press play. Now look at that. Look at that performance. We're now at 600 FPS. Okay, that just doing that, just turning off VSync. You know, when you start Project 5, as far as I'm aware, at least, it seems to put VSync on by default. Now, as you see, it's saying we're spending this much on this, that, the other. But that doesn't matter. It looks like, oh no, green spike. It's using everything to render. But we're getting 600 FPS. That's not a problem. And even if you actually did care what that was, because obviously we'll get to that. I don't like how the window's like laid out for me here. Usually there's a list. There we go, hierarchy. I don't like having the other thing. So it tells you can obviously filter by what's doing what. Now, if we pause it, it basically says, this is how many milliseconds it's taking to do this in a particular frame. So 5 milliseconds for that part of the frame. Editor loop. That basically just means the editor's doing stuff. And to be honest, that doesn't matter. Because when you build the game, when you actually, you know, file build, whatever, that is going away anyway. That's the editor thing's fine. Then player loop. Actually, yeah, this is just all the stuff in the scene, like the player. Like, as you see, it tells you what everything is, like camera render, early update. That's all fine. That's barely doing anything. Collect editor stats. That's just the profiler, you know. And to look at the profiler, you have to have it active. But it's not taking a hit to the FPS anyway. Now, that's all well and good, right? We've increased our FPS by like 500, 600, whatever, maybe even more. Now, that's just due to a setting in the graphics, and obviously, when you actually make your game, if you have a settings menu, you want to have VSync toggleable in case people want it on. But by default, you know, have it off, it's fine. Then in code, let's write some inefficient code. So, all right, so we've got some code with an update function, right? And this happens every frame. And as you know, stuff that happens every frame is not good. You only put stuff that happens every frame if it needs to. So for example, you know, if input dot whatever. If you have input taking, you have to check every frame because otherwise it wouldn't check your input. But let's say it's something else, right? Let's just say debug.log, you know, here. You think, oh, you just debug, you know, you just logging to the console. That's not too bad, right? You know, on an object, you might just be debugging, I don't know. But let's say, for example, it's your player and you want to check if they're on the ground or not. You might have some test thing where you're debugging. Did I save that? Yeah. You're just debugging whether they're on the ground or not. Now, look at this. You notice that when I was just playing it, we were at 700 frames per second. I haven't turned VSync back on. We've put a debug.log and now we're down to 250 frames. Literally, just logging that every frame has reduced our frame rate to 200. And as you see here, the blue bit is a lot bigger. Blue being scripts, okay? We want to know why that is. So let's go. There's a pretty big spike there, okay? So we click there, and that selects this data is for that time. If you actually click on different points, you can check when that is. So let's go to there. Now, you'll see, all right, what's going on? Garbage allocation. There's 10 kilobytes. Now, you know, it doesn't sound like a lot, but it is. Basically, how garbage allocation works is whenever you create a new instance of something, so like, you know, inside a function, you might have like int whatever, or like, let's say you create a string. And anything, one thing about strings, in computer terms, a string isn't a like primitive data type. Primitive data types are like integer, boolean, character. But the thing is, all a string is an array of characters. So whenever you write something which uses strings, it has to make a new string for it. And whenever you have a string with variables inside, so you put like this item is plus and then a variable, whatever, that is making a new variable. Or you're making two strings and then adding them together in a new string. So that's making more strings. Strings are actually quite taxing. Now, debug.log is also quite taxing, as you can see. So if we go down to the player loop, we want to see where the hell is this coming from? Where's all this? Where's all this? So we say, okay, well, 0.6 of it there is for mouse events. That's fine because you have to do that. So here we go at 9.9. This is the main reason. All right, let's go inside here. Okay, 9.9, where it's in an update function. Oh, it's in an update function in test script. Okay, and you can keep going in. You can even find the line. Oh, it's debug.log. Okay, we're saying the log is the reason why that's happening. All right, so you know, let's say we just don't have the log, right? And our FPS is going to go back up. One thing I personally don't know is having an update function with no code. Does it actually do anything? Probably. It probably calls it, but look, it's just 10 times better. That's just debug.logging, right? We're just logging every frame. You think, that's not going to do anything, but really it does. So just saying, if you're testing and you have a log just to check something, fine. But as soon as it works, get rid of it, because otherwise you're going to start adding them all over the place, and they're going to start, like... Obviously, if you have them in your code for testing and they only get called every so often, you'll only notice it on the frames where they get called. But really, you shouldn't have them at all, especially when you build and send your game, because they still happen. They still, in Unity, when you build a game, you get, like, somewhere on your computer where they go to. You get their own local area, so local, the company name, whatever. So if this is for my other game, right? If I go to output log, this is literally just the console, but for the built game, right? So you get all your debug.logs, whatever. When I last played it, I must have had a lot of errors, but it's fine now. So the point is, debug.logging still happens when you built it, so you want to get rid of all of them. I mean, the best way is just to do Control F and then just in your code and put debug.log, and then you can go through entire solution and just get rid of all of them. But obviously, yeah, you might have one object with debug.log, but let's say, you know, this sphere that has debug.log on it. Oh, did I change something? Because it doesn't seem to have the code on it anymore. Put it on the camera. Okay, well, it doesn't matter. The same thing. But if I put it on the here, and then, you know, just we have like 20 now, right? 20 things. Let's say we have 20 players and we're checking whether they're grounded and we're debugging their, you know. Oh, look at that. Look at that lovely 19 FPS, 20 FPS. Now, I said, I've got a pretty good processing graphics card, but debug.logging 20 times every frame. I mean, obviously, 60 frames a second. I mean, or it's meant to be 60 frames a second. And then it's doing it 20 times. 20 FPS now. Look at that. It's ridiculous. So just don't use debug.log, at least not in update functions, but try and avoid it completely, okay? So that's the main thing to get out of this video. It's a lot of people do it and they just don't realize how taxing it is. Now, one other thing is get component. So, well, I'll just write some really taxing things in general. So, let's say some of you will most likely know what caching is. And to cache something in terms of coding, I don't know if it has other terms, probably does, because you can have caches of things. It means to store it rather than getting it every time. So, for example, your browser will have a cache of certain things, so that if it's like, for example, caching images on a page you visit a lot, well, every time you go to the page, it can just load that image from your like cache data rather than like downloading it again. And there's other examples. Now, having a variable is like caching something, right? If you just have a variable, so if I have like private, what components does this have? Let's just say transform. So we have a private transform. All right, that's somewhere to store it, right? Obviously, yeah, it already exists, so we'll just use new. Oh, wait, never mind. That's just, yeah, doesn't matter. All right, and let's say on the start, we, let's say we just, you know, transform is equal to get component. By the way, you never do this because you can just reference the transform anyway. But transform equals get component transform, right? Whoops. And then we can say, well, we'll just leave that, okay? So all these things now just grab the transform off themselves and store it, because, you know, you might need to do that. I don't know. Let's just say you do. That shouldn't be too taxing, right? You're just grabbing the component on the object. That line doesn't really do much. But the thing is, there's this other one. So, like, let's say this is a script which needs to get something from elsewhere. And let's say there's only one of it. The bad thing to do, which is the simple thing to do, but it's bad, is find object of type. Because find object of type will basically go through your scene and find the first thing, and will return the first thing with this component on it. Now, if you haven't already guessed, what that means is it's going to go through every object in your scene until it finds one and then return it. And the problem with that is, you know, you got 20 something objects. Yeah, on the frame, that is the frame. Well, obviously all the frames where it's doing that job, right? It's grabbing the stuff wait, where is it gone? Here it is. It calls the thing to find them all in that frame. That's why it's high. If I put it on update, it would be blue all the way along here. Now, that's all right. You got 23 objects. Now, keep in mind, this includes objects that have children, right? So let's say you have... this one probably won't take very long because all of these have transform, You're trying to find transform on everything. Let's say it's something which only... I don't know. Let's say I make a new script called, I don't know, find me. And I go put that on, like, one of them or something. Alright, I put the find me script on here. Now, let's take all this, for example. I know I've already put it on one of these, but it's fine. And let's just duplicate this a few more times. You got loads of spheres now, right? Now watch this find. We haven't changed the code at all, but just from adding more objects to the scene. Oh, it took a big spike. I froze it by pressing that. But just look how ridiculous that is. That's only one frame, right? Oh, I've gone too far. I don't know if you can go back. I don't think you can. Let's just press play again and pause it. So the point is, right, find object of type. You do it in one frame. But all it's really doing is the job of... There it is. It's ridiculous. It uses so much because it's trying to find... It's going through all of these 200 and whatever objects. And even in a big scene, you might have more than 200 and something objects. It has to go through every one and every child of every one. It has to go through all of them until it finds one. Obviously, it can return early, I guess. So it's got like a best case scenario. But it's still not great. So find object of type should be rarely used, if at all. It's okay in like initialization maybe. When you load a scene, you're already on a loading screen. That might be part of the loading. But if possible... Worst case scenario without this is having like a public thing and just dragging it in the inspector. Let's say you have a script which handles all your inventory slots. You would want a list and to assign them beforehand because you don't want to have to drag. You can use find objects of type which returns all with that. So that would be more taxing actually. If this was like a list of transforms, then that would be even worse because it's going to go through every item anyway. So that's even more taxing. And then let's just for the sake of destroying performance, let's just put this into an update and see what we get. It's going to be horrible. So this is going to absolutely destroy the frame rate. Well, 20 FPS, I'd expect it to be worse. But to be honest, that's not even that many items in the end. But as you see, it's ridiculous. And if you needed to find out what this was, if you didn't know, just click somewhere. Be like, okay, so this is ridiculous. It's taking so long to the player loop. And we're going to the update and we're saying, it's in the test script update. What's that doing in the update? We're trying to find objects. Well, that's clearly what's destroying it. So you go to the find objects and like this line is what is destroying the performance. So that's one thing. In your game, just one line can destroy your entire performance. Now, another thing is, let's say we have update and we call a function called like test function. And in that function, what we do is we say public void test function. I mean, if I was actually trying to be, I'd put this private because we're only going to call it from here. And what it would do is it would say transform. Let's just make this not an array anymore. Transform is equal to get component transform. And then we can say transform dot translate new vector free 0 0 0 1 0. I don't know. And then let's put this in a loop, right? So while I is less than 1000. So what this is going to say is like, you're looping in every frame, and you're getting this transform and you're setting it to a new vector free, which basically the new keyword is a big red flag because whenever you create a new instance of something, it's going to have to find somewhere for it in memory. It's going to have to dispose of it somehow. It's going to have to do something with it. Now, we're getting 1 FPS. Now, I don't know if that was to be expected or not, but we're getting 1 FPS now. Even the editor is lagging. That's lagging. Let's just stop it. Okay, so this is ridiculous. Now, as you'd expect, 1,000 loops a second, that's going to take a while. But theoretically, that shouldn't be too bad, depending on what the code is inside of it. Now, what are we doing? Every single frame, we're getting reference to the transform the object. Every frame, we're translating it, which is fine, but we're translating it to a new vector3. But the thing is, this vector3 is never changing. So if we wanted to make this script more efficient, we would store our, we would say, like, private vector3 is, like, I don't know, translate offset or something, and we'll just initialize it to a new vector3 of type 0, 1, 0. So we've made the new instance of the vector3, but that means we don't have to create a new ever again. What this is doing is 1,000 times every frame it's creating a new one. So let's not do that. We'll just do translate offset. And then why are we getting the component reference every single frame when we already have it anyway? We only need to do it once. So you could just say private void start transform is equal to get component transform, right? And as I said, you can just reference the transform anyway, but this on one frame isn't going to be too bad anyway because it's just getting it off itself. So now we're going to be doing the exact same thing, but we're only doing it once every. Well, we'll see the frame rate difference between 2 FPS. Okay, I really think just doing it 1,000 times is on all these hundreds of objects is actually just a bit too much. Let's just cut it down to 100. Yeah, even in that case, the only way to improve the performance is just not have a loop of 1,000 times. Obviously, cutting it down to 100 goes to 15 FPS. But if we didn't know whether that was the problem or not, all we would have to do is click somewhere and be like, all right, we're spending ages on the player loop, blah 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 blah. And it's the test function. It's this function which is doing the problem because we're translating it every frame. But just changing it from making this every frame to that and then getting this every frame, that improves the FPS a lot. Now, fine, let's just say we're going to do it every frame. Right? We're going to move every frame. In reality, why would you loop moving something that many times in a frame when you could just move it once in the frame by a bigger amount, right? That's the way you would actually go about doing that. If you wanted to do it 1,000 times, you wouldn't actually do it 1,000 times. You would just times the vector by 1,000, for example, and that wouldn't really. Yeah, so we go. We got back to 300 FPS. Now everything's nice. All is good, and these circles, these spheres are flying off. Can't even lock onto it. It seems. Then again, inside the sphere are all the other spheres. But anyway, the last thing I want to talk about is strings. I've already mentioned it, but basically, if we say, if we just add a text component. I don't know, let's just delete all of these. Alright, goodbye sphere. Okay, let's just create a UI text. There it is. Let's just make it white so it's visible. Okay, and we'll just scale it up. That wasn't a good idea because just increasing the text size is bad. Let's we'll do that. Okay, so we want to change this text, right? So we'll put the test script back on here, and we'll tweak the script. So now instead we actually want to say we want a private text, and obviously for text we have to be using the UI, so using Unity engine.ui. Private text, and we can say in the void start, we want to get reference to the text. I have to semicolon that. So we can say, this text is equal to get component text because we're getting the text on the object, the text component on here. And we're going to set something every frame. So let's have a counter. So we'll say private int count. And then all we'll say is in the update function, so private void update, we'll say text dot text, because it's the text field on the text script, is equal to, we'll just say count, right? Well, that's an integer actually. Obviously, you can't convert in string, so you'd have to put toString. And it's a function, so you do that. Now, well, it's not a function. Well, yeah, it's a function on the string. So we also want to say count plus plus. So we're going to increase count. If we put in the fixed update, it would go up smoothly, but it's obviously going to go up pretty fast because we've got a good frame rate. Now, speaking of good frame rate, we'll see what it is now. So it was about 600 or 700 is normal, but now it's at 500. Yeah, that's not too bad. That's not the end of the world. Well, because all we're doing is just on one object, we're increasing a count and setting the text. Let's just pause it though, because when you go look at, I don't know, somewhere here, the main thing you want to look out for if your game's not lagging, because obviously your game's lagging, whatever, 8 milliseconds to a frame like this, you'd probably want to sort that out, but it's the editor loop actually, so it's not a problem because that's going to be fixed by the editor. Player loop, 1 millisecond for all is fine. But if you look at the garbage allocation, you want to kind of get rid of that if you can, and you see, all right, it's in the test scripts update, and it's here. Because basically, when you do the string functions, like converting something to string, it has to create an empty string and then do stuff. It's basically chucking away loads of empty variables that it makes temporarily. So what you want to do is, I mean, to be honest, there's not really a good way to do this as such. That's the main problem with strings. You got to be careful. You don't want to be like setting strings unless you have to. Let's say, for example, you've got one number and it ticks up all the time. As long as like, I would recommend just having the actual thing that's ticking not be every frame, because then you could reduce it and do it every even doing it every 2 frames, right? That doubles the performance, or like doubles the time, or halves the time, sorry, where you're having to allocate useless memory. Now, the problems with this is as well when you start having bigger strings. So let's say the text is, I don't know, let's say it's your plus, this is ridiculous, but number plus is plus count plus, right? Let's say that. So we're actually creating many different strings, creating new ones to put them all together. It's ridiculous. It's the stringing. Let's see what it's like now. It's not even going to take a hit to your performance, really. I mean, actually, you see, it does actually do quite a bit. Not too much. It's still on 300 FPS, but if you look here, it's now allocating more and more bytes of useless garbage because, well, I would say rubbish because I'm British, but hey. Doing this is ridiculous because as you see, class, string is actually a system type on here. It's from system, whereas like, I don't know, integer is, it actually says 2 because it's a special type of integer. That's it. They use int for, I wonder if we can actually go to that. Okay, you can't really look into it properly, it seems, but this is where they define it all. I'll actually get into all that different type stuff when we do, if I ever do C++ with Unreal at some point, which would be interesting. But, yeah, so one other way to write this, okay, obviously, yeah, you wouldn't have all the pluses. That would help if you just didn't do that. This is just another little tip some people don't know, which is actually quite handy. So obviously you got this. Yeah, that works. What you can actually do is you can put a $ before the string, and instead of writing pluses, you can just use curly braces when you want to do that part. So for example, your number is space that thing exclamation mark. That's the same thing. It's just so much neater rather than having it like all the way over here. And as you'll see, that'll do the same thing. And anyway, this video is getting on really long, and I actually want to end it now because I've covered all the main things that'll hopefully help people. Obviously, the profile is your friend. Don't have it open when you're not using it because that reduces the performance a little bit. But yeah, just keep an eye on your FPS, keep an eye on your profiler, and just make sure you keep doing that when you're making your game because it can help you write more efficient code if you realize certain parts that you thought may be fine actually aren't fine. But yeah, the video's far too long, so I just want to say thanks for watching. Obviously, thanks to my Patreons. I've made updates in a few days, so we'll see how that's going. When I start editing my videos properly soon, I will put them on the front poster page kind of thing. But yeah, thanks for watching. If you haven't already, subscribe. Obviously, join the Discord in the comments, and we're on Patreon if you can. But apart from that, thanks for watching, and goodbye.